Hello everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen and e-marketer podcast made possible by Marketing Architects. This is the Friday show that reviews the most frighteningly important media and retail news stories of the week. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, how inflation is still affecting everything.
In some ways, it might be more heightened than we saw during the pandemic because there was a lot of aid for, unemployed individuals for a piece of, the big part of the pandemic, and we're not going to see that here. So it could really become a disaster.
Is 15-minute delivery too good to be true?
Just bad news. We're also creating this stress culture where people expect things to be faster and faster, which I actually think can have negative impacts on the mental health of consumers and also retail and delivery workers.
How much false information do shoppers give retailers?
Heck yeah, I give marketers bad data, and it's because I know what they're doing with it. I take a perverse pleasure in mucking up their databases. Why do you need my phone number when I order a Traffle coffee mug online? Because you're gonna call me if the delivery gets messed up? I'm not buying it. This has never happened.
Is there a ceiling to spending time on TikTok? An unpopular opinion about buying things from TV ads? And how much of a meaningful role do pets play in Americans' lives? Joining me for this episode, we have three people, so let's meet them for crying out loud. We start with our Senior Director of Briefings. It's Stephanie Taglianetti.
Hey, how's it going, Marcus? Happy to be back.
Very good. Welcome back to the show. We're also joined by one of our Directors of Forecasting. It's Oscar Orozco.
Hey, Marcus. Happy to be here.
Howdy. And finally, we have one of our Directors of Reports Editing. It's Rahul Chadha.
Hey, nice to be here.
Hello, hello. What's in store, folks? 4 segments as usual. We start with the story of the week, how inflation is affecting everything. Continues to. We then move to the game of the week, where Stephanie, Rahul, and Oscar will give us the best takeaways they can from each of the 4 stories we have for you to try and win a very pretend championship belt. We then move to Uncommon Knowledge. We'll talk about some unpopular opinions, and finally Dinner Party Data, where we discuss some things we've recently learned. We start with the story of the week, how inflation is still affecting everything. Rising gas, grocery, and dining prices due to inflation are having the greatest impact on consumers, according to a First Insight study, writes insider intelligence analyst Rachel Wolf. Gas, grocery, and dining prices. As a result, Americans have started to buy fewer things and are planning more spending changes, according to NPD Group. 8 out of 10 US consumers are planning to make changes to mitigate their product spending in the next 3 to 6 months, notes a May PR Web article. Inflation is increasingly shaping what people buy. The Morning Consult Price Sensitivity Index spiked March to April, which tracks folks who opted out of purchases due to higher than expected prices. Inflation, folks, as you well know, has been hanging out around the 8% mark every month since February. May's numbers actually come out today, Friday, so we'll see where they land, but no real expectation that they're going to be too different from what we've been experiencing. Rahul, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on how inflation continues to affect everything.
I think it's really interesting that so many different things are happening at the same time. This is the first time in memory I've seen the phrase demand destruction get tossed around in relation to specifically car travel, which is related, I think, more to gas prices as well as new cars. So, energy and food prices are fixed costs, so people's discretionary spending is now dwindling. And I think it's interesting. I think that retailers are probably who were once dealing with shortages from supply chain issues, now we're going to have a glut of inventory just as demand is cratering. I think they're probably going to have to start discounting stuff just to get it to move out the door. And I'm also curious to see, one of the clips you sent over had to do with grocery shopping, changes to grocery shopping. I'm curious to see what happens with CPGs. I think a lot of these companies were trying to turn the dial when people were spending money and just turning that faucet on to see how much inflation and price increases people could bear. Now I think people are going to be less brand loyal and shopping around for discounts, and I think they're going to probably be a little bit more fickle about what brands are picking up at the grocery store specifically.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned energy and food prices. Rachel was pointing out that they are 2 of the huge expenditures. Energy costs rose 30% year on year. Food prices 10% year on year. So it's hard to do anything. I mean, food, you can maybe try a different brand, buy a little bit less of it, maybe different types of foods, but energy wise, it's hard to really change your behaviors other than, just flatly using less of it. You mentioned discounts as well. Some interesting notes on how people have responded to inflation. Morning Consult noting that most popular cost-saving tactics were number 1, comparing prices, 51% of people. Number 2, using coupons, 30%. And then shopping at multiple stores, 25%. Buying fewer items, 19%. And similar research from Numerator looking at people's response to inflation, particularly around Easter, said that number 1, folks looked for promotions. Number 2, they bought fewer things. And number 3, they switched to lower priced items. Stephanie, what are some of the things that are really jumping out to you as the conversation around inflation continues and the people's very real life experience with it?
Yeah, we've been covering this a lot naturally in our briefings. My team today is actually working on an article about beer sales remaining strong. So people aren't shifting down to spend on lower cost beers just yet. But that actually counters some of what's happening in other categories like food, to Raul's point, where people are shifting to private labels for a better value, according to Walmart. And Zach Stamber, who covers retail and e-commerce, notes that mid-market retailers could be the ones that are hit hardest if consumers do decide to trade down to some more value-oriented merchants as a result of price hikes and inflation.
Yeah. Oscar, lots of things that retailers can do to help. Rachel was noting, one of our analysts was noting that with low-income households, they spend up to 20% of their income on gas. 20% of their income, all their income, on gas. So retailers that can help ease some of that pain are in prime position to benefit, especially since 2/3 of folks said increases in gas prices were having the greatest impact on their daily lives, according to First Sight. And then with regards to generic versus more named brands, the share of folks who say they buy from generic brands to save on groceries went from 36% to 43% in the last 6 months, according to Morning Consult. And 1/3 of people said they've already switched from brand to generic in the last 6 months. That was according to CNBC and Momentive. Where do you land on all of this, Oscar?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the differences between high income and low income individuals and households. I think that's a big thing to monitor here. In some ways, it might be more heightened than we saw during the pandemic, because there was a lot of aid for unemployed individuals for a piece of the big part of the pandemic, and we're not going to see that here. So it could really become a disaster if we do start seeing companies cut some of their employment numbers, for example. But they're definitely feeling the pressure much more, the low-income individuals and high-income. I would also say, a key thing to look at is the fact that consumer sentiment is at its lowest point in a decade. And so that really does point to the fact that we should really brace ourselves for a tough second half of the year. I think that's undoubtedly coming. I think we had some doubts maybe a month or 6 weeks ago. But I don't think that's the case anymore. The only other thing I'd mention, my colleagues touched on everything here, but people are prioritizing travel spend too, so that's gonna bode even worse for retail. And you mentioned food prices being up about 10%. I think I've noticed my grocery bill up about 35%. So people are feeling the effects of inflation for sure.
Yeah. Something we'll continue to monitor. That's it for the story of the week. It's time now for the game of the week. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Marketing Architects. TV advertising is a powerful channel for growth, but the traditional process for launching TV campaigns is expensive and complex. So Marketing Architects changed it. With all-inclusive TV advertising, they invest their own money. That's right, their own money in your campaign. All you pay for is media. This approach is so unique, they wrote a book about it. So go to marketingarchitects.com/book to get your completely free copy today. Folks, we're back. It's time now for the game of the week. Today's game. What's the point? Where we read out 4 stories and have our contestants, Stephanie, Oscar, and Rahul, tell us what they think is the main takeaway of the story. Okay answers get you 1 point, good answers get 2, and answers that give you the same feeling as when The Rock used to raise his eyebrow and deliver the people's elbow. Who remembers?
Oh, I love The Rock.
So good.
Much, much better than Stone Cold Steve Austin. Let me just put it out
there. Unpopular Opinions is next segment. But you're right. Answers that leave you with that feeling, they get you 3 points. Each person gets 20 seconds to answer before they hear this. If you run long, you get a technical foul. and minus 2 points. 2 technicals gets you ejected from the game. Whoever has the most points wins, gets the last word. We start with Stephanie. Is 15-minute delivery too good to be true? America's need for speed never ends well. If 15-minute delivery apps sound too good to be true, that's because they are, writes Adam Chandler of The Atlantic. He notes that 36% of folks ordered same-day delivery last year, according to Digital Commerce 360 and BizRate Insights. And yet somehow that still doesn't seem to be fast enough. Enter GoPuff, Joker, Getir, et al. But getting groceries at warp speed comes with very real consequences, writes Mr. Chandler. It's a safety hazard for workers and pedestrians, and our constantly shortening reference points are making us feel more impatient all the time as we expect our deliveries to come quicker and quicker. But Stephanie, 15-minute delivery, too good to be true. What's the point?
I don't think this is possible on a grand scale, and I also don't think it's necessary for the majority of shopping instances. I spoke about this last time. I think we're aggravating an already bad situation with returns in retail and sustainability with packaging. Just bad news. We're also creating this stress culture where people expect things to be faster and faster, which I actually think can have negative impacts on the mental health of consumers and also retail and delivery workers.
Oscar, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I believe Adam Chandler mentioned ordering packages and then having them sit there for weeks. And I'm embarrassed to admit that that's also me sometimes. And I get frustrated when, it's 5 to 7 days and I want it here in 2 to 3, when ultimately I'm not opening all of them right away. So I think this sounds like a marketing ploy. I mean, what Amazon was able to do, offering same day delivery 1 to 2 days was innovation, was growth, was the category going to levels we never would have expected. But now anything less than that is really just kind of out of control, in my opinion.
Rahul.
Yeah, I don't think the math makes sense. Last mile delivery is really expensive. The model really only works, I think, in areas with density, essentially urban environments. And that means that these companies are going to face higher rents and labor costs. And the other thing that's really confusing to me is that they're essentially competing with the bodega or corner store, meaning their target market is like the excessively lazy, I guess. I think that people tried to also make this work back in the .com era. I don't know if people remember Cosmo.com, but it promised, various sundries and goods within an hour delivery. And nobody probably remembers that company. I would bet money that the majority of our listeners probably don't remember them.
Mm. On a serious note, there was a piece in the article which really struck me. They was pointing to Domino's delivery in 30 or it's free promotion, and they were saying that policy was met with, great fanfare in the beginning, but a disastrous ending after a series of serious and even fatal car crashes that involved on-the-job delivery drivers who were accused of rushing to keep their company's promise. They also pointed out that in New York City, lawmakers are trying to ban the 15-minute delivery promise. We move to our second story. We start with Oscar. The potential of Apple's RealityOS. Apple's soon-to-be-announced RealityOS could be a game-changer for marketers, writes Insider Intelligence Director of Briefing's Jeremy Goldman. RealityOS is Apple's supposed OS operating system for its expected augmented and virtual reality headset. Jeremy notes that many significant brands have shied away from releasing immersive VR campaigns, given how few customers can access those experiences. But Apple getting into VR sends a message to people that the nascent category has reached a tipping point, he writes. Just as with the iPhone 15 years ago, Bloomberg reports that the headset is expected sometime next year. But Oscar, the potential of Apple's RealityOS, what's the point?
So we here at the company estimate that about 1 in 10 of the U.S. population uses a VR headset at this point. So about 35 million Americans. There's a lot of interest there, a lot of growth potential. I also thought about the 2006, 2007 iPhone. I mean, I'm kind of a little embarrassed to admit it, but there's a lot of potential here, even before we get to how marketers will be able to tap the OS. And it's more just so when Apple releases something like this, it's going to be really interesting to see how it looks, what kind of features it'll have. Ultimately, I've mentioned this on the podcast too, the intersection of fashion and tech is very difficult. So how can this scale up and really become a mainstay in society, right? But I'm really excited about the idea of this.
Rahul?
I'm still skeptical of AR, but if I was going to bet money on any company coming up with a killer piece of hardware for AR, it would probably be Apple. They work in this kind of great intersection of design and marketing. They're marketing geniuses, having a green text bubble in a group chat is grounds for excommunication in some social circles. But Apple hasn't delivered a game-changing piece of hardware since the iPhone. I think it's important to remember that. And they're also without founder Steve Jobs and their famed designer Jonathan Ive. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess.
Stephanie.
Well, it's important to note that RealityOS hasn't been officially announced yet, and Apple does trademark for products it may never ship, like that AirPower universal charger. And earlier in the week, Gajo Sevilla, who writes for our tech briefing, noted that Apple had an opportunity to outline its AR/VR platform at its developer conference this week, but instead it focused on safer bets like the watch. So really hard to say what the potential is because it seems like it's still a ways away.
At the half-time mark, Stephanie and Rahul out in front with 6. Oscar just a little bit behind with 4. We start with Rahul. Shoppers give retailers false information. Retailers that ask for more information at checkout, like age and gender, often end up with bad, unhelpful information, notes a recent Quartz article. A report from software comparison platform Capterra shows 3 in 4 people provide fake demographic information at least some of the time. A similar share also use a burner email account for online shopping. Even more Gen Zers do than the average. 4 out of 5 Gen Zers do so. Zach Capers, senior analyst at Capterra, thinks retailers should ask shoppers for their data on the second visit, not the first, because they'll be more receptive to maybe providing more information, signing up for a newsletter, or picking up something a little more valuable. But Rahul, shoppers giving retailers false information, what's the point?
Heck yeah, I give marketers bad data. It's because I know what they're doing with it. I take a perverse pleasure in mucking up their databases. Why do you need my phone number when I order a Traffle coffee mug online? Because you're going to call me if the delivery gets messed up? I'm not buying it. This has never happened. I think what companies really need to do is create a clear value exchange for their customers if they ask for data. What is the customer getting out of it? Why should they share this data?
Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, this article is talking about surveys at the time of checkout, which seems like a really bad place to look to collect personal information. It's at the point of payment. That moment doesn't really necessarily elicit a ton of trust and comfort, and you kind of want to leave at that point. So you don't want to give demographic information. There's no incentive, to be honest, to Raul's point.
Mm-hmm. Oscar.
Yeah, customers are just ready to get their order in, and the anxiety starts creeping in because the retailer says there's only 1 more in stock or 2 more in stock. So they're not going to be bothered with putting in that information. I would also just say, since when should we rely just on self-reported information? Since when is that, a smart sort of tactic? I don't think that ever is. So yeah, brands need to think of, as Rahul said, value exchange, but also other ways to get first-party data.
We move to the final round. Heading into the final round, Rahul with 8, Stephanie with 7, Oscar with 6, but it's double points for round 4, double points. Is there a ceiling to spending time on TikTok? We start with Stephanie. American adults who use TikTok are expected to spend a smidgen more time on the app on TikTok than American adults who use YouTube, according to our forecasting team. This is the first time TikTok would have overtaken YouTube on time spent. It's 45.8 minutes a day for TikTok versus 45.6 minutes a day for YouTube. And Twitter is quite a ways behind in third with 35 minutes per day. Oscar, your team worked on these numbers, but Stephanie, you're up first. Is there a ceiling to spending time on TikTok? What's the point?
I mean, yes, there's a ceiling because we don't have infinite time to spend cheekily. But, TikTok is going to surpass YouTube for the first time ever in terms of time spent. Our forecasting team estimates it's going to surpass YouTube's US ad revenues in 2024. TikTok surpassing XYZ company, that's a trend, right? So if we're talking about time spent and maintaining that growth, one thing our analysts point out is that TikTok is probably going to have to find ways to keep luring older demographics since usage is really being led by younger groups right now.
Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a ceiling. I mean, the thing I would lean into, though, is with the launch of TikTok TV, it looks like other socials might be interested to moving on connected TVs. That really is interesting to consider because that would definitely make these numbers inch on up even more. Right now, TikTok versus Netflix, for example, it's about 15 minutes away, daily minutes away. So there's still a lot of room there. But if maybe it will start pushing on some of these SVOD and AVOD platforms. You never know. There's interest there. So we'll have to wait and see.
Rahul?
I think TikTok's short video format is actually really hard to sell ads against. If you're watching a 20-second clip, getting served as even a 6-second ad can seem like an eternity. So I think TikTok might be trying to push longer content because it's easier to monetize via ads. And then it kind of loses a key differentiator. I think Oscar raised a really interesting point about this content getting served on maybe some other device to bridge the worlds between social and CTV or something. But then I think also you're losing a key differentiator for TikTok in terms of its user interface in the much vaunted vertical endless swipe. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how this stuff plays out, but I do think TikTok's motivations really are going to rely around how to make money, basically.
And that is all we've got time for the game of the week. Heck of a game, folks. Very close indeed. Except for your Oscar. Sorry, mate. But drum roll for Rahul and Stephanie. Who could it be? It can't be Oscar. Who could it be? Rahul is this week's winner of the game of the week. Congratulations. 14 points to Stephanie's 13. Oscar's 10. Rahul, you get the... You're lucky you got 10, mate. Rahul, you got... I'm just kidding. Rahul, 14 points. You get the championship belt and the last word. What do you want to tell us?
Oh, I just want to shout out TCAT, Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit. I moved recently to a more suburban area. My car died. I needed to get my drugs from Walgreens, and the bus came through for me. Public transit, yeah.
Yes. All right, that's what we've got time for the game of the week. Congratulations to Rahul. He wins this week's championship belt, at least till next week. It's time now, well, nearly time for Uncommon Knowledge. But first, I'd like to announce the competition winner. So we have a new competition. It's called the monthly... I don't really know what it's called. We give away a mug. I haven't really come up with a name for it. We give away a mug, and we give out 2 free mugs a month if you answer the question correctly that I read out, and if you write us a review. So the question will be read out on every other weekly listen episode going forwards. So it's the Friday show. So the next question will be on next week's weekly listen episode, June 17th, and then every 2 weeks from then on. So you send the correct answers to podcast@emarketer.com and send us a screenshot of your podcast review, and you can win a free Behind the Numbers weekly listen mug. Well, we just had a winner from the last question, which was, what's the most popular video on YouTube? Do you guys know?
No.
No idea.
It is Baby Shark.
Baby Shark?
That
no,
is
that's an
unfortunate.
earworm. Marcus.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Oscar, did you know that?
Yes, I did. Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. Yeah, I had just.
Oh, okay. So
No, my afternoon is ruined now.
I'm so sorry. I've ruined most of the rest of your year. Yeah. So it is that, but I think it's like 10.7 billion. Despacito is like 8 billion. So it's by far and away number one. We had a bunch of responses, which is a miracle. But the winner is Brian from DC. Brian from DC, thank you so much for your answer, for your review. And Stuart, who runs the team, he's going to get in contact with figuring out where we can send you that Behind the Numbers weekly listen mug for free. So congratulations to you. Runners up, Abby from Nebraska. We got your email and your review. And Brittany from somewhere. We're not sure where you're from. But thank you so much to the both of you for also sending in notes, and others as well. So you guys did come very close. If you've done a review already and you want to answer the next question, just answer the next question and send in the same review. That's absolutely fine. But you were very, very close to winning. Brian got there first. So Brian wins this week. Next week, we'll have another question for you guys. All right, it's time now for Uncommon Knowledge. Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge, the segment where we offer up some unpopular or atypical opinions about things. We start with an unpopular opinion from the BBC Radio 1 feature. This segment was inspired by, then an unpopular opinion from the internet, and finally, we get an unpopular opinion from one of our panel related to the media world. So, 3 for you, as always. We start with one from BBC Radio 1. Here we go. No one actually cares about your birthday. Yeah. It's hard to hear.
It's possibly true.
It's very true. Maybe your parents.
I would say not many people. Most people don't. I would correct it to most people don't.
Parents
care.
probably don't care after you turn 18, do they?
Yeah.
21, I guess, is a big deal in this country.
There's a line somewhere where I don't think anybody should be, aside from your parents or family or partner, should be expected to care about your birthday too. You know, it's like we're not 8 years old anymore. I don't know. I don't know where that line is, but
it's 8. 8 years old. Is the line. Yeah, that's the line. Yeah.
Sorry, 9-year-olds. No one cares.
When you think of all the messages you get, like on Facebook, or if you have a party and all, if you have 20 people or 30, most of them don't care. So yeah, I agree with that take.
Like Like, feel free to not write on my Facebook happy birthday. I don't want to respond to it. Just don't do it. Permission to not wish me happy birthday.
Any of Stephanie's friends listening, she doesn't mean it. Stephanie,
I don't mean the thank you either.
wow. Oh my goodness.
Wow. Come on, it's like going through the motions. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. All right, one more for you. And then we'll get to our kind of real one that's not real. This one's from the internet. Receiving gifts is a greedy love language. So love languages, for people who don't know, I only learned about this thing like it maybe a year ago. There's 5 of them. There's words of affirmation, there's quality time, there's physical touch, there's acts of service, and there's receiving gifts. And this unpopular opinion is that receiving gifts is a greedy love language.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You're saying you're measuring someone's love for you based on how many gifts you receive from them? That's not a great way to move through life, I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it can't just be receiving gifts. It has to be, like, I would get if it's, like, action-based, like, you know, your love language is, like, people doing things and showing.
I think that's acts of service, though.
Yeah, so if it's just receiving gifts, that is quite greedy.
But then what if it's receiving, like, very thoughtful, inexpensive, like, gifts? And maybe, like, every now and again. Because when I read this, I was like, oh, who are those people? But maybe that's because I'm thinking of people getting, you know, like new Bose headphones or something, as opposed to like, oh, this very meaningful thing that, you know, matters to you because, you know, it's related to your family, or it's something that I remember that we did together and I bought you something that cost like $2 related to that.
Yeah.
But I think you're talking about the giver. The problem here is the receiver part, you know? It's like the expectation of receiving. If your love language is giving thoughtful gifts, I think that's great. If the expectation you're going to receive thoughtful gifts a lot of times, it's almost worse. Okay. Yeah. Like, I can't even buy my way out of this problem.
It's like either greedy or egotistical. There's like...
All right, never mind. We'll just try and... Sorry, folks. Just to get gifts, people.
I was gonna say I've started to adapt kind of like the Festivus model. I don't know if people have seen Seinfeld, but I don't give gifts every Christmas. Maybe I keep people on their toes, and if they deserved it, I'll give them. So yeah, I agree.
Oscar, we don't speak about Seinfeld on this podcast, okay? Oh, it's so bad. That should be an unpopular opinion. Forget it. We're doing Seinfeld now. Seinfeld is a terrible show. Oof. I think I've said this before, but I'm going there. How do we feel? How do we feel? Yeah, it's so bad.
That is an unpopular opinion.
I know, especially in America. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry.
I'm indifferent.
I'm not sure how well it's aged, honestly. I'd be curious to watch it again. I would be curious
to watch again, yeah.
The first season falls pretty flat, I think, but, you know, they were finding their feet or whatever.
I'm a huge fan. What are we talking about here? Oh, God. Great show.
Oscar's horrified.
Believe it.
All right. Sorry, Oscar. Anything else on receiving gifts? I'll stop bashing.
No, just that I like the idea of giving, you know, unexpected gifts is very nice, but not when, you know, birthdays, Christmas, all that. Yeah, no, do away with it.
All right. Your opinion is disqualified because you like Seinfeld. But moving on. I've got one for you from the panel. It's me today. And this one comes from, Ad Age, they had a survey they did with the Harris poll in October of last year, looking at attitudes and preferences regarding TV ads among American adults. And they found a bunch of things. Number one was 88% of people said, when I watch a show on a streaming platform, I often see the same ads multiple times. Yes, I don't know how that wasn't 100% of people. 81% of people said that they multitask during commercial breaks. That makes sense. 82% of people would prefer to watch ads before a show rather than during. And 50% of people said they're okay seeing an ad right after I have paused the show. But the one number that stood out to me, it was the lowest number, but it still seemed high, was 37% of people would buy a product or service directly from an ad during a show. 37% of people, just over a quarter, would buy a product or service directly from an ad during a show. And I just struggle to see that's true. I mean, sure, they're saying they would, not that they have. But I was trying to think of and I've scanned a few QR codes on the TV before, but what would I actually buy? And would I buy, you know, something from an ad on television? The only thing I can come up with is if it's lunchtime and I'm hungry and they throw up something for Panera Bread and I'm like, yeah, I'll definitely buy that thing, and maybe I scan something and maybe it gets delivered to my house. Maybe I'm watching a Cubs game or the Lakers game or whatever, and I scan it. Or I guess it would have to be maybe a team in my city where I'm living, and I scan the thing and it says, for tickets to tomorrow's game, we're giving this kind of a discount. So I would scan it and buy it. But outside of that, I can't really see anything that I would want to buy directly from the ad. Maybe I'd take a discount with me for later. But I couldn't think of anything. What do you guys make of this number? And 37% of people saying they'll buy a product or service directly from an ad during a show.
It didn't seem as high for me. I started thinking about like the home shopping network and QVC and all that, and not exactly ads, but think about the popularity of those channels.
Good point.
24/7, and people are buying things. Apparently, I've never done it, but buying them straight off the channel, calling in. I guess I could see the pull, especially, you gave some good examples too, but especially now ads being so immersive, and, we see it on social media and even in store being sort of inspired. I could see how it could happen. That 37% you said doesn't seem as high to me.
I thought it did seem high, especially if you think of platforms and programs where the whole premise of the show isn't to sell something, right? If you think of the other use case, I can't think of a time I've ever purchased something based off of a TV ad, because I think I'm more in that group of folks who is preoccupying themselves with something else while there's an ad playing on TV.
Yeah, Oscar raised a good point, I think, about QVC shoppers. I think those people probably express some kind of purchase intent. It's similar to like maybe live streaming commerce these days. I think probably the difference is, TV ads are more interruptive. People might not be in the mindset of making a purchase. And I also think there's not a good kind of ironed out agreement on how is this interaction going to work. I think there could be a possible friction point. Do I scan a QR code? Do I have to use my remote to navigate to a button? Do I have to enter credentials on a TV screen? I think that'd probably be a huge hiccup.
Yeah, good points. All right, that's all we've got time for Uncommon Knowledge. Of course, it's time for Dinner Party Data. The part of the show where we tell you the most interesting thing that we've learned recently. And we start with Rahul because he won the game of the week. Rahul, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm doubling down on the public transit, so get ready for some nerdy infrastructure data.
Here we go.
I know what the kids like. So I was just curious to know, I was trying to figure out how many subways, meaning underground public transit systems, there are in the U.S. I couldn't find that information because I got distracted by subway ridership numbers in the U.S. This comes via Wikipedia, so, take it with a grain of salt. So these are all heavy rail rapid transit systems. And this data is from 2019, so it's pre-COVID. But no surprise, the New York City subway was top of the list. 2.7 billion rides. 2.7 billion rides in 2019. Number 2 is Washington, D.C., at a very distant second with 238 million. So New York City has more than 11 times the ridership of D.C. Chicago's in there at number 3. The T in Boston's number 4, and the Bay Area Rapid Transit in San Francisco area rounds out the top 5.
Gosh, I was going to look up the population of DC versus New York, but it doesn't matter because of all the tourists. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the population is just like people who are there, live there.
Right.
But in terms of the tourism in New York as well, which is why the Knicks continue to sell tickets, because it's just tourists who don't know. They don't know any better, Good. Fascinating. 2.7 billion. I mean, if you've lived in New York, then people are like, yeah, that seems low. But if you're outside, if you've never lived in New York, you can't even comprehend that number. Stephanie, you're up.
All right. So in researching product price hikes around inflation, I saw that ketchup was among products hiking up their prices. So I have some ketchup facts for you.
Yes.
Heinz is the number 1 selling brand of ketchup in the United States. In the 1830s, did you know that ketchup was actually sold as medicine used to treat indigestion and diarrhea, which, to no surprise to me at least, was found as an ineffective remedy?
How long did that take?
Also, this is one that's up for debate. It might be an unpopular opinion, but apparently the etymology of the word dates to 1690, when the word catsup entered the English language and then appeared in its true form later on in the form of ketchup in 1711.
Yeah, this is one of those facts that I've heard it before, but I still don't believe it. That it was called catsup. Because why the hell would it be called that? And then also that it was used to treat people for any kind of ailment is beyond me.
I'm still
Nevertheless,
not sure.
indigestion.
Yeah, still not sure what catsup is. Yeah, I've heard that before. Confused.
Yeah. All right, very good. Terrifying, but very good. Oscar, you're up.
All right. Well, Rahul talked about public transit, so I'm going to come at you with cars stuff and information.
Okay.
I saw a study, I thought it was interesting, about traffic noise that significantly slows down children's memory development. So not a great story, but it piqued my interest because as a New Yorker, I went to elementary school and middle school next to a heavily trafficked highway. So this really worried me. So looking into the study, essentially it found that traffic noise significantly slows down children's memory development and attention skills. They looked at about almost 3,000 kids between the ages of 7 and 10 to assess this and sort of the cognitive development over time. So they tested kids throughout a year, and what they found is that children exposed to 3 times more traffic in the street than others had memory development that was 23% slower and attention ability that was 5% slower. So not as bad, but the memory development was really bad. Yeah. They also found that it was loud noises, things like that were worse than kind of sustained high noises. But I remember dealing with all sorts of noises like that growing up in school. So we need to create soundproof rooms. We need to move schools to the country. I'm going to become an advocate. I need to do something about this because the study really worried me here, guys.
Yeah, that is really concerning. And it's funny because as an adult, a lot of the time you think about the effects of noise pollution and what that does to your mental health, to your stress levels, to your anxiety. But yeah, it's often, I've never heard it talked about in terms of how it could affect kids. Oscar, do you remember it being a thing when you were a kid?
For sure, yeah. Jokes aside, definitely, it was just a kind of a constant noise, but you would sometimes hear the dump trucks or the annoying person honking their horn incessantly. So yeah, it's kind of a problem.
Must be exhausting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, very interesting data. I got one for you real quick. Dogs, cats, and other pets play a meaningful role in the lives of many Americans, according to YouGov America. So I've got 5 stats from their survey about the role that pets play in Americans' lives. Pet owners on this panel. We've got, Stephanie's got a what?
2 cats.
Okay, 2 cats. Rahul, I don't think you've half adopted a goat at one point.
It's all right. I had to relinquish custody.
Oh, okay, that's tough. Oscar?
Yeah, no pets.
No pets, okay. So, Stephanie, let me ask you, how would you well, actually, okay, let me go through this first. Let me first say it. So the first point is pet people. How many people are pet people? 40% of Americans say they're dog people. 20% say they're cat people. 30% say they're both. 8% say they're neither. I think, Oscar, you're that person, aren't you? You're that group.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Of pet haters. Ugh.
Don't put that out there. Please erase that. No, I love pets. I love them. They're amazing.
Do you?
He sense the sarcasm.
You're just saying that so we don't get any more hate mail.
Pretty much.
All right. Okay. His inbox is full. Stephanie, okay, coming to you for the second point. How would you characterize your relationship with your cats?
Stepmother.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so about 60% of Americans have a pet. 60%. 40% have a dog. Just over 30% have a cat. Of those pet owners, 9 out of 10 consider their pet to be part of their family, which goes to the third point, which was when people with pets were asked to describe their relationship with them, most said parent, you've said step parent, then best friend, and then owner. About 7% considered themselves their pet's roommate, and 14% of cat owners saw themselves as a servant.
Wow.
That's funny. I think the funniest one is roommate. Like, imagine there's a roommate who aggressively pooped on the floor in your apartment. That's a crappy roommate.
Literally.
So, puns! Puns are always welcome on the show. 2 more points for you. One is what they do with their pet. What kind of activities do they do with their pet? Well, 64% of people with pets will sleep in the bed with them. I imagine not the pet's bed. That's insane. 57% will buy their pets gifts for holidays. 40% celebrate their pets' birthdays. 25% say they sometimes dress their pet up for holidays or events. I don't know what events.
Events.
I like a gala.
Where are they going?
A charity.
Hey, I
ball.
love when they dress up dogs for Halloween and stuff like that. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm a sucker for that for sure.
Pets look like they hate it though. I'm sorry. It does look cute, but I also think to myself, what the hell are we doing? There's been no pet that's like, I'm really into this. They always look at you like, you kidding me? And the final one is pet and owner similarities. Half of Americans think pets share personality traits with owners. A quarter think they share the same physical resemblance. I hadn't really thought about the personality traits being similar to owners, but it's interesting. I'm so curious as to what Victoria's got to say, because she's got a Chester, which is the most lovable dog ever. And I'm very curious about Victoria. How would you characterize your relationship with Chester? Complicated.
I call him complicated, putting it lightly. He's like my child, but also like a money leech. I spent entirely too much money on Chester. This dog eats
very
these
bougie
chews that like almost bankrupt me every month, and like he's so crazy. But this dog has the most impeccable comedic timing. He's mischievous.
I think it's fair to say he's changed, you know. He used to be very honest and genuine, came from a working class roots, and he's very bougie now.
He moved to the big city and that was it.
That's what changed him. That's what we got time for today's show. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Rahul.
Thank you.
This week's winner of the Game of the Week. We thank Stephanie.
Thanks for having me again.
We thank Oscar.
Thanks, Marcus.
And we thank Victoria, who edits the show. We also thank Stuart, who he runs the team and does a lot of stuff for us in the background. Although I think he's a Knicks fan, so scrap that, forget it. We thank everyone who's listening, of course. To ask us questions or just say hi, you can email us at podcast@emarketer.com. We'll see you guys on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Marketing Architects. Happy weekends.